Now we welcome Fran Peric. Fran Peric is a data science consultant at StatWorks. The NLP community has more recently discovered a promising approach, namely prompting. In this talk, Fran gives a practical introduction to prompting and shows how this can be applied to building NLP solutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mic check, mic check. All right. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you are enjoying the SDS so far. In this talk, I will quickly give you a simple introduction to prompt engineering, which is a quite easy concept. However, in order to do so, I will have to do some steps, take some steps back, and introduce you to the evolution of natural language processing. So what we will have a look at is there are really large language models. And these models are trained on a lot of data, right? So basically, you scrape the internet, you use all of Wikipedia and like many blog posts, many texts from any source, and your model is learning the structure and the semantics of a human language. This is called NLP, so natural language processing, basically how machines are learning human language and are able to understand input and able to give output depending on the tasks. So quick question. Who is using NLP so far? All right. So most of you are using NLP. Actually, all of us are using NLP in different products. So if you think of Google Translate or, I don't know, Amazon Search and Amazon or Zalando, all of them are using steps and pipelines which are including natural language processing. And basically what you have is a really large model. Sorry for that. So you have a really large model, and this model is just able to understand human language. It is not yet ready for a specific downstream task. But with prompt engineering, we can add information in the input that the model receives. And given this input, the model is able then to perform specific tasks that we want the model to do. So here we have two examples. We have two inputs. American Air just landed 3 hours late, and now we need to wait 20 more minutes for a gate. I have patience, but none for incompetence. One thing that we might want to do is do sentiment analysis. So is this a negative sentiment? Is this positive? Is it somewhere in between, so neutral? So a classification of the sentiment of the text input. So this is an example, and we will get to this later on in the end of this talk. All right, natural language processing models. Back in the days, people in this area were not able to do the stuff we are doing today, just because they didn't have the resources and they didn't have the data, right? So if you think of 20 years back, or even more, 60 years back in the days, the progress which was at a different stage, and we were not able to use these resources that we have at our hands today. So they were doing feature engineering. So basically providing inputs that might be relevant for understanding of human language. Next, there was architecture engineering. So once neural networks came up, there was no need for feature engineering because the algorithm was able to understand what are the interactions between the features, and therefore we did not have to do any feature engineering anymore. So now we had to decide which architecture would we like to use, and it turned out that there is one architecture that is predominant today, which is the transformer architecture. So the next problem was then objective engineering. So basically, what is the goal for the algorithm? What is the function that is trying to optimize in the training process? And there are different training or objectives out there. So for example, we could mask the text input, basically say, all right, we omit one of the words in a sentence, and the model should predict what is the word that is missing, right? Another thing might be next word prediction. So instead of masking a random word in the sentence, we try to predict the next word given a part of the sentence. So these are two different, okay. So these are two different objectives that there are in natural language processing. And the final, that's where we are today, is prompt engineering. So here we can provide in the input for the model what the model should do and what we would like to obtain from the model as a prediction. All right, so in a training process, simplified looks like this. We have this pre-training task, which is not relevant for the model and for an industry, for a use case in general. It is there because we have a lot of data and it is not labeled. So this is part of unsupervised learning or self-supervised learning, where we, as I mentioned, just mask single words in the sentence, and the model predicts then the word that is missing. So this is a process where we are able to create a model, usually a deep learning model, with many parameters. And maybe 2-3 years ago, we had then to fine-tune this model on a specific task we would like to tackle. So for example, sentiment analysis, or entity recognition within a text, summarization, and so on and so on. So these are few examples for fine-tuning. Exactly. But now we have prompt engineering, so we do not really need this fine-tuning step. We can directly use the big model and use it for prediction. So we provide here the input using prompting, and we get the output, what we would like to have. So here are a few examples. As I mentioned, sentiment and recognition of the entities in a text. And given the examples from before, we can say, all right, this is the text input, and additionally to this text input, we provide, is this a review? Is this review positive? And we can also provide in the input few examples of reviews and what is the sentiment regarding these reviews, such that we specify what we would like to have from the model as an output, and here we get no as a response. That's it. Do we have time for questions?
Unfortunately not. This was only 8 minutes. We have to start the next talk in 1 minute. Please go up to Fran later and ask him your questions and rate him in the app.
Yeah, so one quick comment. So we have a booth downstairs. I will be there. If you have any questions, please follow up on this.